first we have a special intermezzo. I'd like to give the floor to José Carlos Aguiar from Leiden University. José Carlos please sit down, José. Thank you for coming. He's a researcher at Leiden University on the Mexican worshipping of the Santa Muerte as a way of dealing with the cruel reality. Please.
So, well, thank you very much for the invitation to talk about this. I was supposed to be able to walk, not anymore? Yes? Okay, great. Well, I mean, we have been talking about all these narcos, all these powerful drug men who are supposed to be powerful, who are supposed to have endless impunity, who are supposed to be able to bribe or to do or to break any kind of rule. But really, are they? Huh? These people also need protection. And perhaps the most important protector of these drug traffickers is La Santa Muerte. Can we come back, please, to the first slide? Santa Muerte has become perhaps the most important cultural icon of Mexico since the beginning of the 21st century. And this is very much linked to the underworld and how the underworld merges with the upper world. Santa Muerte is very much influenced by all this pre-Hispanic material culture of Mexico, particularly Mictlantecutli, who is supposed to be the protector, the king of the underworld. Next. And since then, of course, all these different representations of the Olmeca and later Azteca and Mexica culture in Mexico was passed on through the years. Next, please. And this is perhaps the last representation made in ancient Mexico about Mictlantecutli, who was, as I say, the god of the underworld. This is precisely what the Spanish found when they came to Mexico in the beginning of the 16th century. Next. But Santa Muerte is not only about ancient or pre-Spanish culture. It's also about Catholic and European iconographies, particularly the Greek methodology, particularly the anthropos, Morta, who is one of the three faiths. Next. And of course, all these 16th century cultural representations about the links between life and death. Next. And of course, Mexican culture. Since the 20th century, there has been this very funny or ludicrous way of working or representing death in Mexico, as this painting by Diego Rivera represents. Next. And lately, the hard rock culture. Next. All these merges in this image of Santa Muerte, who became very well known since the beginning of the 21st century, the 2000s in Mexico. Next. And from here you can go on, please, every 2 seconds changing images. And this image merges all these different iconographies and all these different presentations of death in one powerful, special saint who is supposed to be the protector of the traffickers in Mexico in the beginning, but nowadays even in the United States, having to Texas, to New York, also in Spain and in South America as well. This image is, first of all, a powerful worker. It's supposed to bring to life and to reality any miracle you can ask for. So these images, what do they represent? And what do they represent particularly about social order and legality in Mexico? Santa Muerte is, more importantly, a space of negotiation. People negotiate social boundaries and what's been accepted as moral in Mexico nowadays. It's not a particular religion as such. It's not a sovereign or stable cultural matrix, but it's very much rooted into these deep Mexican representations of death, as I was showing in the beginning, but also emerging forms of narco culture. And different people are devoted to these things. Not only the traffickers, also migrants, who also ask for money and protection to Santa Muerte in different kind of ways. Through rosaries, el rosario, through cleansings, through masses, through different kind of rituals that somehow try to protect and to break through the vulnerability of all these people. In many ways, Santa Muerte allows us to understand that Mexico has not been going through a process of democratization. More importantly, has been going through a process of politics of death. Death has become the way to make politics and to gain and retain power in Mexico. Who are these people? They're normal people, let's say common people, who have no jobs, who are single mothers, who have AIDS, who are transsexuals, who are prostitutes, who are working or dealing drugs on the streets in Mexico City, in Guadalajara, in the south of Mexico, in the north, more or less everywhere. So, I was saying, but through this way of devoting or worshipping the dead, people accept things that are bad in the mainstream society. Santa Muerte allows people to understand that there is no black and white, there is no good or bad, there is no right and wrong. Everything belongs to humanity and to the human condition. Death is an essential form of justice, and this is what Santa Muerte reminds us. And the most important form of justice is la Santa Muerte, or as they call it, the Buena Muerte. That will be a quick death, a painless, rapid way of dying. Since the 2000s, I was saying cathedrals, churches, altars, shrines have mushroomed all across Mexico. And they, in many ways, represent utopias. They represent a way of thinking about death, but also about social order. And this is precisely why Santa Muerte is perhaps, as I was saying in the beginning, the most important cultural icon in Mexico in this moment of violence and neoliberal disorder. Santa Muerte is about social negotiation. It's about negotiating and opening borders and giving room to identities that are not accepted by mainstream society. Santa Muerte is then an emerging cultural icon. It gives new content and form to the Mexican popular culture. It is indicative of the institutional crisis in Mexico, the church, the state, the health services, but also about the precariousness and fragility of Mexicans in front of the neoliberal order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, José Carlos, for this completely different look on the issue of violence. Is there any, we could take one question from the audience, if there is any, on this issue? No?
Well, let me tell you a little bit, how this project emerged. It was very clear in the 2000s in Mexico when I was doing field work in the marketplaces on the street vending, that something was changing. At once, all these people who were selling pirate CDs or herbs or food stopped doing so and shifted to this powerful image. So they were selling the statuettes, or they were selling incense, or they were selling different kind of items or products that were supposed to be part of this worshipping. And in many ways, the Santa Muerte became very visible in all this material culture on the streets and marketplaces, but it was also indicative that something was changing. This form of devotion is not completely new, as I was trying to explain with this presentation. It relates very much to these pre-Hispanic romantic ideas of how death belonged to Mexican culture, but it's also indicative of the crisis in which Mexico is now going through nowadays. What I'm saying is that in a country where in the last 10 years there have been more than 150,000 people, there are 20, 50, perhaps 30,000 people missing, in which the institutional order is not workable anymore. In an order in which you can expect anything from the institutions, nor from the judiciary, nor from the prisons or anything. So people start to look for alternative ways of coping with this reality, and this is perhaps the most visible material signifier of this crisis, on how people develop new works of thinking about the underworld and the forces that define daily life in Mexico.
But are you saying that people are not looking or going back to the traditional, let's say traditional, the Western religion, like the Catholic Church or other kind of religions, that they now have this new way of expressing their religious feelings?
Precisely. Santa Muerte is about crisis. If you look, to the percentage of Catholics in Mexico, it has fell down to the 60%, 63%, according to the Catholic Church itself. Whereas previously it was 90, 93% of Catholics. All these sexual scandals, the corruption cases, because also the Catholic Church has been taking money from the narco barons and so forth, this has had a huge impact on the legitimacy of the church and how Mexicans perceive the church. So they think, well, why should I go to the Mass and take the Holy Communion from the hands of a priest who perhaps was just touching a girl or a boy 5 minutes ago? So this is shifting very much, and I'm saying, I mean, this is a quote from my fieldwork, actually. So this is a major shift in the way how also this liberalization of the economy, of the politics, has also had an imprint on the religion. How different markets for religious offers are popping up in Mexico, and this is a very informal one, really from below, from the people who are working on the streets and trying to make a living out of it.
And the last question before continuing, is there sort of, if you look at the geography of Mexico, is there like, would you say it's more stronger in certain regions or in the capital? Or?
There is a wide geographic, how I call it, the cultural geography of Santa Muerte. I've been doing field work in the south of Mexico, in Chiapas, in Oaxaca, in the center of Mexico, in Texas, in New York, and I see that each of these cathedrals and shrines tells a different story. For instance, I was last week in Mexico City interviewing a woman in her late 50s who had a son who was in jail. And for the time he was in jail, he came across Santa Muerte because jails, or the prison, becomes a very important space of socialization of Santa Muerte devotion. So many of the prisoners make a promise to Santa Muerte in order to come out, alive from prison. So he did, and he opened there, and I put it on the presentation, this huge Santa Muerte image. There was a bus next to it, so you could see how tall it is. It's 22 meters high.
My God.
He built that as a way to pay back Santa Muerte for being able to come out of jail alive, but he was killed 1 year later. So,
Santa Muerte.
Santa Muerte. So what his mother did as a way of, I thought, of going through the raw process, of losing her son, she took it over. She was a Catholic, and she was very much against the devotion of her son. She said, okay, sorry, but this is brujeria, this is witchcraft, this is wrong, this is Satanism, or this is Satan's work, so you shouldn't do it. And after he died, she did this as a way to wash away her guilt and the process of losing her son. And other churches are open just to make money because these people make cleansings and rituals and they charge money for it. So you see a very wide array of scenarios. In the north of Mexico, in Tamaulipas, is very much about protection of drug traffickers and narco roots, of course.
Thank you very much, José Carlos, for coming.